Okay, Ruth. So we're starting, and the first thing I wanted to say in the recording is you have no idea how much you mean to me. As,
Oh,
as a as a very young child, 13 years old or so, you were the person I would see in the news on LGBTQ issues, and that issue, the Anita Bryant issue, and those days is what made me come out to my mom in the car when she kept wondering why I kept defending the homosexuals. So you always to me appeared to be the voice of reason, the champion, someone who had, and as someone in the fight, I really understand how much courage you have. It's really
I want
exceptional.
to interrupt, Damien. You are one of the friends I have who I would not have had any other way. This is just splendid. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. I have to start with your start. Like, obviously, you're someone with so much courage, so determined, and you took on everyone. Like, what made young Ruth become that person?
Uh, Huey Long, when I was 4 and 5 years old, every little girl wanted to be Shirley Temple. I wanted to be Huey Long. My father would stand in front of the radio, which stood this high and was a major piece of furniture, and he would yell at this man for the things that he was saying on the radio. And in my 4 and 5 year old mind, I knew I wanted to be the man on the radio who could engender that much passion in my father over the words. And
Wow.
when I grew up, I discovered those were politicians, and of course, girls could not even think about politics. And so I spent a whole part of my life stuffing envelopes and raising money and walking and knocking on doors and supporting candidates who I thought were good for us. Uh, I've been an activist all my life. Richard and I moved to Miami right after the wedding. We took the first week as a honeymoon, and the second week we got jobs and discovered Miami was Jim Crow territory and really quite ugly. And so I got involved in that. From the civil rights movement, you moved naturally into the women's rights movement. And I was there at the very beginning. And when I was ready for the county commission race, uh, three young men who I knew out there in the world from their activities, were screening candidates for any public office and asking if they would support pieces of legislation. And the one that they asked me about was the amendment to the already anti discrimination ordinance. It was a natural for me. I had known prejudice all my life. I was a girl, I was a Jew, I was a Democrat, I was an activist. I was on the wrong side of the Jim Crow issue. I was a rabble rousing woman. Uh, it was natural to move into this next phase where I, as involved as I thought I was really quite unaware of the depth and the ugliness of this issue.
Would that have changed anything for you if you were aware of the depth and the ugliness?
Well, once they raised the issue for me, I became eminently aware of television showing paddy wagons back up to bars, hauling men out and making certain that the camera sees who they're putting in the paddy wagon so that people were being arrested for assumed to be gay and exposed in the public sector through television. It was really quite ugly and raised passions that people didn't even know they had.
Um, if you want to pause a second, I think someone might be knocking at your door.
Oh, go do your thing.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm good.
Oh.
I'm going to close this. Well, people can just. Oh, that's a gorgeous picture of you, Damien.
Thank you. We're back.
That handsome gentleman.
Thank you. We're back. Part of what I want to ask you while you were talking about that is you lived in such extreme times where there was so much hate. And like you said, you were a woman, you were a Jew, you were a Democrat, Jim Crow. How were you so elegant? Like, how were you able to? I never recall you swearing, getting upset. I mean, you were just elegant.
Well, I'm an actress.
Good one.
And you learn how to, I was an aspiring actress. It was a way to bring attention. But what you learn is how to expose that which is positive and swallow that which is negative. And after the horror of Anita Bryant and the Herald, Miami Herald, attacking me personally, I was able to stand up and run for a second term 2 years after all of this horror. And people say, oh, she's a nice lady, leave her alone. And she got reelected. So there is that. You can be passionate and you can be active. You don't have to be ugly about it.
Wow, that's great advice, actually.
It has helped me through life, a long and very productive life.
Without a doubt, at that time, Ruth, did you feel, what were your biggest challenges in those moments?
Well, the issue was taken away from me at the public hearing when I'm talking, as I have described, about discrimination, about prejudice. Into the public hearing is introduced a gay who declare, or a would-be gay, I'm not sure he is or ever was, announcing that his sex is better than our sex. And all of a sudden, this issue of prejudice becomes a sex as opposed to a gender issue. And the Herald was ferocious and horrible. Full page ads about pedophilia, about bestiality. Gays can't reproduce, so they will recruit and steal our children. You don't want gays teaching your kids in school. I mean, horrible, awful stories in the Herald without any balance or misgiving for the misinformation that they were spreading.
How did you deal with that? How did you react to that?
Dismay, disappointment, horror. My family and I were getting death threats. The chief of police wanted to give me a police escort. I said, the minute I have a police escort, my life is in danger. Leave me alone. A horrible happenings out on the street. It's not wonderful to get into an elevator with 5 people who hate you. I mean, the floors just don't come fast enough, and they let you know. And again, the awful misinformation. And let me go back to when I used to walk, I still do walk into a room and people are telling an anti-Semitic joke. And I would say, wait a minute, I'm Jewish. And they say, oh, not you, Ruth. And that's what was going on with these people who hated gays. But yeah, I knew one, he lives down the street, he's fine. And that absolutely tore me apart.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it must have. And just dealing with it.
Well, my ability to, or my seeming ability to empathize with what was going on, and of course the the misinformation. I have a friend uh, who's gay who has been asked several times with me around, when did you come out? And his response is, when I was born. He was born gay.
Right.
People don't, at the age of 13, sit down and say, well, wait a minute, maybe I'll be gay for a few years. I, I don't know that people choose to be gay. People are born with a proclivity, with a life, and that misinformation, that misunderstanding led to a great deal, and still leads to a great deal of discomfort.
And what role do you think religion played specifically during that time?
Well, one of my heroes in the gay rights uh, campaign is Hugh Westbrook, who is still in Miami, a dear, dear man who was brand new to Miami as a minister in a small church in, I think, North Miami, someplace. And after I introduced the amendment to the ordinance, he called, and I had never met him. He didn't know me, but he knew what I had just done. And he called and asked, how could I help? And I fell madly in love with the man and still am. And I asked him to put together a coalition of clergy who would support the ordinance. Mm-mm. There,
Nothing.
no, no. Not only did he not get response, but he got some pretty heavy duty um, pushback and anger. Uh, was and still is a great disappointment to me.
Yeah, I remember in Catholic Mass, pamphlets were handed out, at that time against the ordinance,
Oh yeah.
which I
Oh,
thought was,
organized religion was no.
and even if you think about the demographic groups in Miami at the time, I think you could safely say that the Black community and the Hispanic community, Latino community, were not going anywhere on this issue.
This was not their issue. This was something quite alien, or well, alien. I'll leave it at that. And they could not make that leap, that understanding that being Black and being discriminated against is not the same as being gay and being discriminated against. That simply wasn't a civil rights issue for them um, as a community. There was incredible pushback, and these are people who were naturally friends for me in my candidacy. This was the first time I had ever running countywide. Came out of a field of 8 to a runoff to win the runoff. So I've been out there in people's faces for at least 2 campaigns, and it just didn't work. They didn't see me as the proper vehicle. Why aren't they doing it for themselves? Are you gay? As a matter of fact, in the height of the campaign, Richard and I enjoyed our 25th wedding anniversary. So we took a full page ad in the Herald, um, sitting at our piano with the three daughters behind us, the two of us, and thanking the people of Dade County for a wonderful 25 years and looking forward to. And the next thing I know, I am in that famous elevator, and someone back over there says, "Okay, which one of those broads was your lover?"
Wow.
My
Wow.
three
So you
daughters.
were a lesbian.
Yeah, so I get teary when I talk about it. It was so ugly. There was no recognition that as a person who knew prejudice, I could support others who were prejudiced. Anyone who had ever been a Pollock, a WAP, name the horrors that people had to listen to. They couldn't make the transference.
How are you able to raise a family in that?
Say it again.
How are you able to raise a family in that environment?
Raise a what? What's the
A,
word?
a, raise a family. How are you able to
Oh,
raise a family in that environment?
the family was, because this wasn't anything new to them. First of all, they knew people who were friends, who were acquaintances, who had come to dinner, had come for the evening, and then were identified in addition to everything that they knew as being gay. So it made no difference. I mean, these were people.
But for your kids growing up, for your children growing up with
Yes.
that kind of environment and hostility, I mean, how did you manage that?
Oh, I think they were always ready for for new ideas. Uh, Richard, my husband, was incredibly supportive throughout our life, and the girls just saw this as another of the issues that they had to face and try to understand. And they did. And to this day, they are incredible feminists. They are just so strong in the way they face life and the way they grab it by the throat and go for it. It's really quite splendid.
Wow, that's fantastic. What about toward the end, like when you decided not to run again? What drove you not to run again?
No, I ran. I have been running.
But eventually, when you left public office,
I didn't leave public office. Public office left me. I ran for mayor. After 8 years, three terms, I finished 2 year term, got elected to a 4 year term, got elected to another 4 year term, resigned in the middle of that when I realized that on a side seat, I was fairly ineffective. But as mayor, I might be able to make some real change in a town that simply wasn't ready for what it could be, and I wanted to make it ready. So I ran for mayor and was de-elected. Didn't make it, and so I then, wonderful opportunity, went to didn't go to Alva Chapman at the time, who was the head of the Miami Herald, called and asked what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And he offered me the community foundation, which was perfect for me. I had raised money in every corner for my several campaigns and had been on every street corner campaigning. So I knew what this community looked like and what it wanted to be. So that combination, and Alva was really smart enough and supportive enough to pave the way for me.
And when you found yourself in that role, soon after, the community started struggling with HIV and AIDS. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
AIDS outed a whole lot of people who would rather not be known as gay and certainly not suffer the horror of that pandemic. Forgive me. Uh, I am sequestered, but not alone, as you can see. Um, where was I? I got lost.
On HIV and AIDS, just basically talking about what that was like.
Um, and like most people I knew, all of a sudden my Rolodex was disappearing before my eyes. And the people I knew and loved were suffering, and even worse, dying without family and without the community supporting them. It was a horrific, awful, awful time. And we at the foundation stepped up, and I was a part of a national conglomeration of corporate dollars for AIDS education, prevention, and cure. Money that corporations wanted to spend but couldn't because they didn't want backlash from their stockholders and their customers. So, in essence, the money came quite legally to community foundations who did the distribution of those dollars on their behalf. And with the invention of that, we were able to bring lots of money into Miami-Dade County that would not have come otherwise, that we couldn't have collected here or in Miami. So it was an outreach, and among the first to recognize that there was a huge need. And it wasn't popular.
Oh,
People
no.
were dying.
Yeah, no, and I remember distinctly that even when the federal government was ignoring the entire epidemic,
And the president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, never, never, never said the word.
we were very lucky, though, to have the foundation because you did have a dedicated funding stream for HIV/AIDS prevention. And especially in a place like Miami, that was very pivotal.
Well, at the time, care was covered by when they were fortunate enough to have family or partners or friends. And so that kind of need was covered. But to support that activity was where the foundation came in. And that's when we recognized the strength of what wasn't there before, the thing called the gay community. Because before that, and before the ordinance was introduced, as I described earlier, paddy wagons would follow them around. Schools would fire a gay. Housing could be discriminated against. Excuse me, we don't think you'd be comfortable here. I had heard that as a Jew. I knew what it was like to be denied housing because of my religion, because of the way I was born. Nothing different with gays. And to this day, that the same ugly tactics are now being used against transgender people just tears me apart. I can think of nothing sadder than a child who was born and expected to be one and knows in their fiber that they are a different gender. For them to be struggling with that internally and then to have the community fighting them, it's it's unbelievable as far as I'm concerned, how people can be so crude and ugly.
Ruth, can you go a little bit more into a statement that you just said that there was a gay community when, when AIDS was happening? Can you talk a little bit about that, about how it changed?
Coming out of the public hearing, I, the way the government worked at that time, you introduced an ordinance, it was advertised to the public if it got sufficient votes on first hearing, and then 6 weeks later, there was a public hearing, assuming that the public would have been fully educated to what the words meant and what the impact would be on the community. At the first hearing, I was applauded. The Herald gave me a magnificent editorial, and I say gave me because I was singled out as being courageous and forefront and every nice word you ever wanted to know. They applauded the foundation, the commission that was going to support this. And indeed, there were 9 of us. I got the 5 votes that I needed. And we all heaved a sigh of relief, and that was it. In the interim, 𝗥𝗜𝗦𝗘 Bryant, who you mentioned earlier, was a client of my husband's, not a friend of the family, but had endorsed my candidacy and was really quite threatened by her minister and her husband, who saw this as a career for her. And so all of a sudden, the Herald, after a change of leadership on the masthead, changed its point of view about the ordinance and about the amendment to the ordinance. And the place exploded. Anita and her minister became virulent. And as I say, it turned from a prejudice to a sexual issue and took off in directions that I had never expected. I am quite honest about that. It just took off without me. Coming out of what I have just described was, on one side, a powerful moral majority led by Anita, who made the front page of newspapers around the world, talking about saving our children and taking back government. And I don't have to make their platform. And on the other side, these men and women who had been hiding because their lives were in danger were empowered to come out and to begin to organize as groups. And the next thing you knew, you had what we had never had before, a gay community. It was powerfully exciting to watch that happen, to watch these men and women who had so much to contribute to come out of their homes and into the larger community. And they weren't selfish in supporting only their issue. They were progressive enough to see other issues that they wanted to see happen as residents and taxpayers in Miami-Dade County. And
I remember. I was just going to add that I remember at that time, if you were, almost everybody was aligned with the Black Civil Rights Movement and with ERA, Equal Rights for Women. So it was, I almost think, a more progressive era, in many ways.
Oh, everybody remembers the 60s. Can we stop this for a minute?
Absolutely.
I want to see what's going on out there.
Sure, no problem at all.
Right back. Yes, sir. Oh, when you take the garbage, would you take the newspaper? Okay. Not the book. Okay. Is that back? Is that? That, no. Okay. Just the papers. Okay. Thank you. Forgive me, Damien.
No, no problem. No problem
Very
at all.
busy morning around here.
It's a Monday.
Aha.
It's a Monday.
Monday morning.
Monday morning. Okay, so we're back. Where we were was talking about the gay community.
Oh, and you were talking about progressive.
Yes.
And I was reminding everyone that we had come out of the infamous 60s and we were in the 70s, where everything that we had imagined could happen was being moved forward. So I have lived a pretty extraordinary life. I've been through a whole lot of eras. And in Miami, Richard and I used to tease, we lived in 6 different Miamis. We were there for 60 years. And every 10 years, it was a different Miami. You had different neighbors, you had different buildings, you had different progressive or repressive ideas. And so it's a very exciting place to be. And I think it still is. You don't have to be the grandson of anyone to show leadership or to be allowed into the boardroom.
Absolutely true. I wanted to take you back to the HIV/AIDS crisis and how you saw the gay community change back then, during that crisis and after that crisis.
From my point of view, I saw people I knew, some I liked, some I didn't, some I loved, facing an unknown, completely unexpected scourge. I mean, it was just, if we think the pandemic today is frightful, imagine what it was like when it was described in responsible media as the gay cancer. I mean, those were 2 words that were verboten. And to have them combined and used as an enemy of these people, it was painful, punishing, and so incredibly sad because, as we said earlier, I was losing friends. I was losing people I respected. I was losing people I didn't much care about. But these were real live people who were disappearing from the face of the earth at very early ages. And it was quite unlike anything we'd ever seen before. And that people were rude and ugly enough to say, well, they brought it on themselves. Or how can you claim to be a human being and say that out loud? And that's what we were living with. Something we knew nothing about, didn't know how to get at, knew it wasn't right, knew it was ugly and awful, and um, and hoped that our friends would would be immune in some way.
You think anything good came out of that horrible phase?
Well, I'm an incurable optimist. So, yes, I find something. I found compassion among the gay community. I found enough straights who understood what was happening. I found families who were reunited, who had been cast off, and they found each other in the face of death. Um, I found a memorial, the AIDS.
Quilt.
Yeah, thank you. The quilt uh, was so magnificent in every way. Uh, the the uh, the energy, the empathy, the talent that went into it, the sheer enormity of it, told a story that couldn't be told any other way, and brought people to understand what was going on.
Yeah, I think also it helped the gay community organize, to figure out politics, to figure out funding, I mean, to stand up for itself, to really, you had no choice. If you were going to survive as a community, you kind of had to figure out the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. So um, it was that issue beyond the amendment to the ordinance, which really rushed people into the need to coalesce, the need to be a community, and the need, as you point out, to understand how the system works and to infiltrate the system and make it work for you and for your friends.
Both with AIDS and with gay rights back then, particularly with gay rights, Miami took on, I think, as a city, a very significant prominence. Would you agree with that? Would you, do you think, because I feel like we became national when everything happened with Anita Bryant?
Well, I I was pleased that it went national. I was dismayed that it went national because it went national with the wrong message. Uh, I mean, again, prejudice was my mantra. That's what I was talking about, and the press was not terribly supportive, and there was a certain frisson about Anita, uh, and and a ugly, horrible um, hypocrisy. Her dresser, her hairdresser, her makeup artist, everyone who surrounded her was gay. And, oh, well, not them. Uh, she was maligning those people who had made her career and made her successful. And when Richard worked with her, he used to put her on conventions and she would sing a song and disappear. And he always enjoyed working with her because she took direction so well. That was the phrase. She took direction well. Well, she took direction very well from her minister and from her husband, who was building a second career for her. She had told Richard, without her husband knowing, that she wanted to write out her public appearances, that she wanted to go home and be a wife and mother. And so that Richard convinced her to stay through the bicentennial era, where she could sing patriotic songs, bank that money, and then retire with a nest egg. Her husband wasn't thrilled with this. He wanted her to continue being Anita Bryant. And this gay rights controversy was his opportunity to manage her and to move on to the next career. And the gay community got caught in the middle of it.
Wow. I've heard you in the past make mention of the county form of government because we went through that single member districts change in county. And I was wondering what your thoughts were about representation in general and going to like single member districts versus general commission seats. What at this point, looking back, what would you think about that?
Well, I said all through my political career that in Miami-Dade County, if you didn't like what was happening, you changed the structure of governance. And if somebody got elected who you didn't like, you wiped away their district. And so I have no idea now how Miami-Dade County is governed. 13 people representing a small segment of the community, which means that you can go in as one of 13, fully instructed by your district, carrying the water for everybody in your district, introduce an idea and not be able to get a second because nobody else cares about that issue. So you are, in essence, impotent.
Yeah.
And based on what I just described, I campaigned heartily against it. In my day, back in the Ice Age, you had to come from a specific district. You had to live in a different geographic space, but you ran county-wide. So I had to know what was happening in North Miami, as well as Kendall, as well as Westchester, as well as Miami Beach. It was a way for accountability to everyone in Miami-Dade County. And we were elected county-wide. There were elections where I got more votes than Bernie Sanders as a senator from the state because we had a larger constituency. So no, it wasn't easy, but yes, it was effective. Yes, it was important for us to know. And there is no government that has Miami-Dade County as its only responsibility. I don't know how many state jurisdictions there are. I have no idea. Well, how many cities do we have now? What?
I think it's in the 20s, but I don't.
Oh, no, in the 30s.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Yeah.
I mean, every time turn around, there's a new city popping up. There is no state legislature for the whole of Dade County. There is no one save the mayor of Dade County who wakes up in the morning and has to think about the county as a whole. Everybody else has a piece of the action. For that reason, I think that the county taxpayers and voters have got themselves a very bad deal.
For those that don't know, Ruth, can you explain what it was like prior to that structure?
Well, I go back before the Ice Age to when there were these cities, an unincorporated area between the cities, and a government for the unincorporated area. Richard and I built our first home in Miami Shores Heights, which was really nothing more than a plat on the page. It sat between Miami, North Miami, Miami Gardens, and Miami Shores. And it was this tiny little swath of land. And there were these little enclaves all over Miami-Dade County. Some wise people got together with an idea of consolidating Miami-Dade County. They had just done this in Jacksonville, Florida, although theirs is a different structure than what we were doing in Miami-Dade. And I was one of the League of Women Voters, women out on the street, campaigning, knocking on the door, saying, this is something we should really be doing. And the voters said, I know my mayor. I live in West Miami. I know my mayor. I know my policeman. I know the firefighter. Why would I want to consolidate? And so we spoke about all of the things that we wanted to sell. And it went down in huge defeat. The second time we went to the public with the idea, we said, we will maintain the cities and consolidate with the unincorporated areas. So instead of getting a racehorse, we got a camel. And we put it all together in this conglomeration of whatever we had. And that's how metro government started. And so you had the autonomy of the cities and the overlay of the county. And through the years, whatever the cities didn't want to do or didn't have the money to do, they would hand it off to the county. So that's how you saw a lot of the consolidation of libraries, for instance. You saw a lot of the fire departments conglomerating. And you had this ability, if I lived on this side of the street and you lived in the city on the other side of the street, the fire department would come and make sure your house didn't burn down, but they couldn't save mine. I mean, I'm pushing it to the limit. But it became this them against us. And slowly but surely, the county gained more and more autonomy over the delivery of services. Airport, City of Miami gave it over to the county. Seaport, same thing, because they were not revenue producers. They were terrific drain on their economy. The county had sufficient assets to build those into businesses. So you had an airport that now generates huge amounts of dollars. The airport is one of the biggest economic centers for Miami-Dade County. Jackson Hospital was the city of Miami. The county took it over and put huge resources into, upgraded, and made it the place to go if you're in trouble in Miami-Dade. Parks, all of those services that are so important found their way over to the county. Now, the big push, after they carved it up into 13 different districts, which is so bizarre. The big threat from watching government is from the state legislature, which is telling every city and every county what it can and can't do. As we speak, the Florida legislature is deciding that no jurisdiction could reduce its commitment, its financial budget to police departments. Well, that's a decision that should be made at the local level. The horror in Boulder, Colorado, where the man with the gun killed. The city itself, Boulder, Colorado, passed legislation saying that the gun that was used was illegal in their city. The Colorado government said, no, 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 there's nothing wrong with that gun. And they disallowed the local legislation, which allowed that man to use that gun and kill citizens in the city of Boulder, Colorado. And while people aren't necessarily being killed, they are being denied their right to vote and set their own quality of life in their own jurisdictions. And at Miami-Dade County, I think what they've done is successfully compartmentalized themselves, 13 individual districts in competition with each other. And the state is coming in and just swallowing all of the autonomy that the local jurisdictions should enjoy. I don't know why anybody would want to run for a local jurisdiction now. The Republican Party has a part of its platform to do away with pay for school boards, school board members. Why? Because most of them are women. They don't need to pay women. Women do this out of the goodness of their heart. Let their children go hungry, but they don't need to be paid. And they want power at the state and the national level. Locally, we're getting too uppity.
And Ruth, back then there were 5 commissioners?
9.
9, and they all ran countywide?
9 commissioners, one of them was a mayor. And when I said I got 5 votes, out of 9, 5 is the magic number.
Gotcha. And they all ran countywide?
All ran countywide. No matter where you were supposed to be someplace else. No matter what you were doing, you were supposed to be doing something else.
And
but
so
at least you were thinking about the impact of what you were asking for on Homestead as well as Miami Gardens.
So if you had your wish, what would Miami-Dade government look like again, like what it was back then? Basically 9 commissioners.
Yeah.
Worked. And is there any truth to that? In order to get minority representation, you would have needed to have single member districts? Or
it's where do all of the women live? In what district would you find more Nicaraguans than any place else? In what district would you find more Blacks? Dade County, the strength of Dade County is that we are everywhere, and that the upward mobility concept works. Cubans came to Miami, lived on Southwest 8th Street, turned it into Little Havana, and as soon as they got enough money, they moved to the suburbs. It's the great American dream.
Yeah.
And this is true of people in Miami-Dade County.
I've heard you say before that Miami-Dade County is like a little petri dish of what's going to happen in the future in this country because of the diversity, which we always call a salad, because we really don't mix very well. Do you want to comment a little bit on that kind of diversity and the challenges that can bring?
We have always been in the forefront. And when other communities were in bankruptcy, we were flourishing. When others were moving into, we were still back here. So It's been a perverse and very appealing community. If you don't like change, go someplace else, because that's all you're going to get here in Miami-Dade is change, is guaranteed. Most of the time, it's change in the right direction. But sometimes Miamians kick themselves
Yeah.
and hurt themselves. This last election, I think, was a national election, was a shame for a community of immigrants to vote Republican because they didn't want more immigration. It's back to the old zoning. We got in, pull up the drawbridge.
Yeah.
I got mine. You don't need any. It's so selfish and un-American.
Ruth, what do you miss most about Miami? Do you miss it?
My friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you tired of the change, of the speed of that change?
Oh no, no, no! I
No?
wasn't tired of anything in Miami. I hit a certain age and realized that indeed I was living, while I had some of the most spectacular friends in the whole wide world who would do anything I asked, I was alone. My family had moved away, and I was on the top of a building living alone. And it occurred to me that this was not the safest or the smartest thing to be doing. And so I moved on to what people told me was going to be another chapter in my life. And I said, no, 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 this is going to be a new book. And it is a completely different experience. I'm in a congregate living. There were apartments in a building. Uh, but there's very different politics. I came to Georgia in time to turn it blue, in time to get two spectacular people elected to the Senate to save the Senate for President Biden. But the retribution, the backlash, the nastiness from a party with no politics other than to have the power. They have passed some of the most regressive voter suppression laws. I mean, it's illegal to give water to someone who has been standing online for hours to vote. They wanted to make it illegal to vote on Sunday because more blacks vote on Sunday than any other day. I mean, it's all so transparent and so ugly that it breaks my heart. So, what it teaches me is as soon as you think you're ahead, you better look over your shoulder because they're coming after you. So,
And
it's a lifetime of fighting.
And Ruth, for someone that's had this lifetime of fighting, what advice could you give the young people who are seeing the ugliness, who are seeing the battles, who are stepping up, raising their voice, which that alone is courageous, I think, in today's world?
I had one overarching imperative. I was afraid they were going to do it without me, whatever it was. I had to be there. I had to be in the thick of things that I thought was worth working. And it's been an extraordinary opportunity, A, to bring about change, and B, to work side by side with some of the most delightful people you could ever meet.
So if I hear you right, it's show up and get involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These things happen whether you're there or not. You might as well be there and make sure it comes out the right way. I mean, as we were just talking about what happened to Atlanta, um, we achieved, but we got slapped on the wrist, or worse. And now we have to continue fighting to make certain that those we put in place stay or are replaced by like minded people. I mean, it starts with one person. It's, uh, it's so simple. If you don't do it, someone else will, and God knows what they're going to do. So you might as well go. And as I said, you meet some of the most remarkable people and you get involved. And you can stand there and say, I built that museum. It's so wonderful. That road actually goes someplace they need. They're using the people mover. Isn't that exciting? I mean, these are things that all started with one person, one idea, one initiative. So don't just talk about it, don't complain. It takes as much energy. Do something.
Ruth, I think that's great advice. You are such an institution here. And just knowing that you're not physically here is a void, believe it or not, for a lot of us. I mean, I'm privileged that I can.
A purely selfish, self centered, okay, what's in it for me decision.
Got it. But I just want you to know, I want you to know what a hero you are to so many of us in this community, and how we love you, and we don't take for granted all those horrible things you had to live just to bring some justice.
The thing that I miss most are being with you and making things happen.
Well, my guess is you're still making things happen.
Do your best.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for your time. You are amazing. I love seeing you. I love hearing everything. I could do this for another hour.
Some other time.
Some other time. Big kiss to you, Ruth. I love you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.